I like to try different tools. I end up using my machine all the time, which always creates last-minute challenges. Figure this out. All right. Hey, folks. It's good to be here with you all. I'm going to make this a fun, interactive session, so we'll make it like a little bit more participatory, and I hope you folks have questions and comments, and some of the stuff that we're going to do is going to be a joint exercise. Is that cool? All right. So the way we're going to start by making it interactive is the following. Point your phone to this, and we're going to do a Menti session in a second. Ready? That was a trick to see if your folks are paying attention. All right, so now we're going to start by, this is a quick survey. It's going to take us a few minutes, but just let's get some participation going. What's your favorite AI tool? Granola, interesting. ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity. ChatGPT's gotten bigger. Notebook LMs, that's interesting. All right, we got 28 folks. We're going to get close to 28 before we answer. And so definitely looks like ChatGPT seems to be a Team Ohana AI analyst, I'm sure. Well done, whoever did that. All right, we got 21 of 28. We got 7 more to go. Come on, folks. In interest of time, going once, twice. I'll go to the next question. AI will completely transform how work gets done, and there are 3 questions actually. In the next year, what do you think? Do you strongly disagree or strongly agree? In the next 3 years and in the next 10 years. So there are 3 questions. How strongly do you agree or disagree with this? Interesting, fantastic. Nine, 18, we'll wait for our magic number of 21. 21, okay. So as you can see, most of you have a very similar intuition that it's not kind of there yet, but we believe in this tech, right? If you look at the score on strongly agree in the next 10 years, everybody thinks it's going to completely transform how we work. But the first response in the next 1 year was a 1, right? So it was more of people saying, I'm skeptical in the short run, but optimistic in the long run. The next one is, does AI create jobs or eliminate jobs? What do you think? Wow. Nobody. Okay, eliminate jobs. Thank you, one person, for having a different opinion. Interesting. Another person. But I think the consensus is it's going to be a huge workforce shift that happens. It's neither going to create nor is it going to, it's going to both create as well as eliminate. And that's going to be a shift that we're experiencing. And I think that's about right. And then how do internal functions, and think about the G&A functions, finance, recruiting, and HR, do they become less strategic, more strategic, or do they get automated away? I love the responses to this question. There's a confidence and conviction, which I agree with. So almost everybody thinks that internal functions are going to get more strategic with the change that happens. And I think this is the last question. What are your predictions for the workforce of 2030? And this is a free-form text. Anything goes. Conversational, okay? We can do more than agile, okay? AI agents as employees, I think many of us can see that. Less junior positions, more strategic level work. That's interesting. I actually have the counter view over there, but we can talk about that separately. And lots of uncertainty for new grads. I think that's right, but I would extend it to say lots of uncertainty. There's no qualifier beyond that. It's lots of uncertainty for all of us. I sometimes joke and say, LLMs are really good at predicting stuff. and the more unpredictable you are as an executive, the harder it is to eliminate your job. Right? So, but that's just a jest. All right, so last one. How prepared are you for this change? Very well prepared. Bring it on. No idea what to do. And Facebook relationship status style, it's complicated. I guess it's complicated. And that's why we are all here trying to make sense of what's going on. I love the confidence of very well prepared. Bring it on. Is that Team Ohana? All right. So I wanted to start off with this so that we all can think about what we're going to do. I agree with many of the views you've said, and my intent in the next half an hour or so is to share my views on where things are and how can you prepare for this change. But we'll do a little bit of another interactive thing in between, and we'll have some space for questions. So with that, I want to start with a little bit of framing. So what has happened in simple terms? So this was, as Tushar said, I was fortunate to spend time on Facebook, Palantir, Google, and now the funnest job I have is at Roblox, where we have fused people and systems into one team. And that has given me the fortune of looking at some transformations that have happened. But if you look at even until 5 years back, most of the data that ML could operate on was structured data. That was data that was there in tables, and you could only do models that were based on tables. What has happened with Gen AI is you've unleashed unstructured data, and majority of the data that is there in an organization is unstructured data. That is text, voice, video, all of that is now has been unleashed. So you can now do a lot more. The second thing that has happened was in the past, if you were to do any form of machine learning, you need to be an ML engineer. You'll build some models either with TensorFlow or scikit-learn. But now with Gen AI, with simple prompts, you can do a lot of fancy stuff. You can, for instance, give a piece of text and say, tell me the sentiment of it. This used to be a classification problem. So a lot of NLP problems just became a lot easier, where everyone can now do machine learning. And the third thing is, in the past, the output of AI was very simple. Like I think if you remember the early image classification days, all it would say is it a cat or a dog, yes or no? But now you can do much richer output. It can generate images, it can generate videos. And now the current hot area in the world is world generation, where you actually have physics involved as well. So it can do a lot more generation than before. So that's kind of what's happened in a nutshell, is you've taken data that was hidden in enterprises, unleashed it, and then let anybody use advanced intelligence to interrogate this data. Okay. Now, having said that, there is also this thing about agentic tools. So what's that? What's the big deal about agentic tools? And I think many of us would have wondered on, is this a new buzzword like crypto, or is it something else? And I think there is something real about it. Like if you think about the static workflows of the past, you had to have a fixed workflow that you define, and you give it a series of tasks. The key difference in an agentic workflow is you talk about goals, you don't talk about tasks. Right? You don't say, here are the sequence of tasks you want to do. You know that the LLM can do multiple things. You give it a set of tools and say, here are the goals I want you to achieve, and I want you to craft a path to achieving it. So what you've done is workflow automation in companies has been upgraded, because you can now operate at a higher intelligence level of giving people goals as opposed to tasks, right? Or giving the machine goals as opposed to tasks. So that's the big deal about agentic workflow. It also lets you have very flexible workflows. You don't need to plan for the infinite permutations that are there. You can give an LLM a set of tools and say, given a user intent, you figure out what's the workflow that needs to be constructed. Right? So that's the two big things that have happened. And that's why people are like, oh, I suddenly have a much more capable workflow automation that's there, and how do I unleash it in the workforce? So that's the big deal that's happened. The rest of the section I want to devote to how do we be successful with this transformation that's happening? But before that, I see a lot of people feeling a little angsty about, I don't know if am I too late? Are companies ahead of me? Where are things? So I wanted to assure you with start with it's still very early. Don't freak out, right? There is a lot to do, and let me explain this chart to you. This is from a McKinsey report that just came out, where they had a survey to about 2,000 people. And what this shows is along the rows are the different business functions in an organization, and then they are shaded by have they started an AI transformation journey, or have they fully scaled it? So if you see blue and darker shades of blue, that means that's the percentage of fully scaled workflows within a business function, right? So in IT, if you see, for example, the dark blue 2 represents fully scaled. And then the way to think about this is what's the amount of gray in this chart? And there's lots of gray, which means most people are very early in their journey. So if you feel you're early in the journey or if you feel you just started, chill. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We good with that? All right. Thank you for that interaction. That's fun. Okay, now let's go to, so how do we go about changing this, right? The first, and you all are like leaders of different functions in your organization, the first thing that you need to do is lead the change, right? And this again is from the same report. What this shows you are two charts. The left are everyone except the high performers, and the right are high performers. And it asks them a very simple question, which is, how committed is your senior leadership? And what they see is companies that are high performers when it comes to AI adoption, their senior leaders are 3x more committed. Right? So you as leaders of your organization have to figure out a way to get learning routines to be on top of this. I mean, as an example, you all coming here is a way of fueling the curiosity. So the first thing you got to do is lead the change. Now, one thing that so like all of you have been on this journey for a few years now, and I go between like fascination and frustration, right? Fascination on things it does and frustration on simple things that it cannot do. And sometimes the journey from fascination to frustration happens in 10 minutes, right? So, and here's my view on this is for a long-term trend, and I believe AI is a long-term trend. All of you believe it's a long-term trend when you look at the survey that we did. For a long-term trend with a lot of hype around it, it's perfectly okay to vacillate between optimism and pessimism, okay? But don't take the foot off the pedal on being curious. You can be very pessimistic, but this is a long-term trend. So you can be like, oh my God, this is so hard. This is difficult to do, but you can't reduce your curiosity. And with this, you have to foster a culture of learning, right? So that's the second thing that you can do as leaders is your organizations, people are all looking to say, I have my daily jobs. This wave is sitting at me. I don't know what to do. And you got to help them make sense of it. So to share some real examples, we chose Gemini as and Google as our stack. It can be any stack. I'm not pitching any particular product. But the thing that we did is for engineering functions, of course, there is a self-learning loop that is there. But we had to catalyze the self-learning loop for GNA functions. And it's as simple as get some advanced Gemini training, like how do you use notebook LMs? Somebody had said that they like notebook LMs. Who was the notebook LMs fan? Okay, thank you. So it's a pretty fascinating product. And then we also have them. We had people instead of writing walls of text, ask whether vibe code a small React app that is visually much more appealing, so people can like understand what you're trying to communicate. So this notion of catalyzing an organization's learning journey is something that you'd have to take on. So you foster a culture of learning. And a couple of other examples that worked well for us at Roblox was one of our HRBPs took all the expectation matrices that mostly is very hard to understand, put it into Notebook LM, created a podcast out of it, and then managers are much more able to reason, oh, this is what you actually mean as the difference between different levels. So it's a much better way for for someone to use the tool, but also like easily add value to the enterprise on an area which was like very non-shiny. What you see on the left is we built a conversational engine where you can have conversations with non-playing characters. So if a manager wanted to go and say, I want to understand compensation, I really don't understand compensation, and these are like, I've got some very basic questions, they can do it in like a very psychologically safe environment, which is also fun. Similarly, if you're like, I want to give feedback, I don't know how to give feedback, you can go and play with this NPC, which does a conversational engine with you. So these were ways in which we said, this is coming, and you can embed this into your workflows, right? So first is you lead the change. Second is you foster this culture of like continuous learning and experimenting that's there. The third thing is like most people are like, where do I start, right? And this is a table that is roughly to give you some idea of potential areas of success. And again, it's opinionated. It could be. This is my strong conviction, but lightly held. And I'll change that with data. But wanted to share some of my thoughts on that with you, right? First is there a tolerance for probabilistic outcomes? Because LLMs intrinsically are probabilistic, right? So I don't see any CFO saying anytime soon, take all my transactions, run it through an LLM, and then do SEC filing automatically for me. That's not going to happen, right? That's a very deterministic workflow. So if there's a tolerance for probabilistic outcomes, then that's well suited for AI. The second, which is an interesting insight, is many have looked at AI as some form of an efficiency optimizer, and hence they have looked at the EBIT side of it. But it is much more applicable in the innovation side than in the EBIT side. Right? So this has been, there was a recent paper on this to say that the innovation areas where you have a co-scientist or a researcher who's helping you get much better are the areas where it's currently applicable. So I think focusing on that will give you higher ROI than if you try to change the efficiency. And we'll actually do a fun exercise with a workflow where we can go through it. And of course, third is obvious. It's better for knowledge work. It's not there for physical work, we still have to do it ourselves. But the knowledge work is an area of AI. I believe the other piece which you all see is there is going to be enormous amount of change management, and you got to pick an area where the openness to change management is extremely high. If you feel that that area is kind of medium or low to openness to change management, don't waste your time right now. It can be something that you do in the future. We talked about leadership buy-in. Training data, a great example of training data is coding. The reason it works in software engineering so well is that the training data for software engineering is exceptional. And hence it's able to generate code. So you want to think about how much of training data do you have for the area that you're doing, and you got to be very iterative in this. So the tolerance for iterations has to be really high. So if you're going to attempt it in a business function where the first sign of failure people are going to give up, you might as well not start. Right? So that's a negative way to say it. The positive way to say it is go to people who are really excited to do multiple iterations. All good so far? Yeah. Keep going? Yeah. Okay. All right. Now the second version of this is where are people finding success? So if you want to see, the way to read this chart again is on the top, on the columns are different industry verticals, on the rows are different business functions, and the bubbles are the size of percentage of business functions that feel that they have reached some scale of scaled workflow with AI. So when you see, let's take a column and say technology and software engineering, and you see the bubble of 24, it says that 24% of organizations feel that they have reached scale on that business function. What's another way to read this chart? Is you probably have a better chance of finding success where people have already found success. So if you're going to go and do a supply chain or inventory management, and my engine room days were in supply chain management, they are again very deterministic workflows. You're not going to have a probabilistic foundation to get success in that. So this gives you again a map of what are areas where you could go and attempt this in, right? So lead the change, foster a culture, understand what are the areas of impact, and then this is, I'll not go too deep in it, but somebody in your organization has to own what is the technical architecture that we're going to use in this agentic world. And some of the pieces of a technical architecture is what's the common user interface? It's not just about a sparkle that you turn on different products. What's the common user interface? Is there a reasoning agent which figures out what's the task that needs to be done? What's the workflow engine that one can use? You need to have memory because you need to persist the knowledge of the organization across. And then there is a system of connections to multiple existing systems. So you need a way to connect to your systems of record, be it Workday, be it Salesforce, be it SAP. So that's the control plane. And then all of this has to have an underlying infrastructure. Now at Roblox, we are about 80% engineers, and you have an engineer running the people function. So we tend to be much more technical, and we've built a lot of these around open source. But you don't need to do that. It's just don't feel intimidated by this, but you can choose any of the hyperscalers. They all have an architecture that helps bootstrap you and really accelerate you on this. But my point of this is there has to be a technical architecture underlying that compounds, because every project that you do cannot be a project where you start from zero again. It has to have the learnings of the past. You good? Okay. The next chart was just a visual of how we envisioned it, where we said hey, what if we had a place where people can go and look at what are the agents everyone has created, so they can say, oh, that agent, say Tushar created is really cool and it's got lots of success. Let me pick up that agent and use it for myself. Is there a place where you can go and look at workflows and run those workflows? Is there an MCP store? So this was just a different visual version of the technical architecture that I talked about. But the point is, you got to have somebody in your organization saying, I'm going to own the technical architecture for transformation into this new world. Okay. I want to take a slight detour now. One of the most important things that LLMs are harnessing is the knowledge that you have in the organization. Does it make sense? Okay, it is the knowledge bases you've created, your emails, your Slack, your Atlassian, your Jira, your GitHub code repositories. All of this is the foundation on which an LLM is going to be used and deployed in a workflow. But the way we have built knowledge graph, we have not paid any attention to the knowledge graph that's been built in organizations. Almost no organization has got a knowledge graph which brings these data of these different systems into a place that can be harnessed as context for an LLM. So one of the things that somebody in your organization has to think about it is, how are we carefully curating our knowledge graph? We all know really well that one of the key things for an LLM now is the context that's given to it to answer a question. Yes? And that context comes from a knowledge graph. So as you think about your technical architecture, also think about how are we building this knowledge graph that is going to compound for us in the future. So that's the technical piece of it. I wanted to share one thought, which is the key, a strong assertion is we all feel with AI work is going away, but I don't believe work is going away. But workflows as they exist are going away. Okay. Now here's where we're going to do a fun exercise together. Imagine with LLMs, what do we have? You have an unlimited. Unlimited is infinite, or as my 7-year-old calls it, it's infinity 100. Right? So you have an unlimited supply of interns, okay, who dazzle you with their brilliance. You got this. All of us have this right now. But they're unpredictable. You can't say, I can't use them. You got infinite supply. And you can't just deploy them in the wild because they're unpredictable. That's kind of what you have right now. Okay, now having said this, let's design a customer support system. You ready? Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you the way to not do it to start with, and then let's together decide the way to do it. The simple way to not do it is right here. A user goes to Slack. You turn on a fancy AI tool in Slack. The fancy AI tool reads off a knowledge base and answers a user's question. How many of you have done that? Nobody? Okay. Yeah. Or there is some company who's pitching you this and saying, hey, go to Slack, turn this on, this will work, and then it'll answer all your questions and you'll be fine. What's the problem with this? Wrong? Context is missing, which leads to wrong answers. Yes, some wrong answers. So hallucination, again, leads to some wrong answers. So again, brilliant interns. Whatever is the size of your knowledge base, they can read, but they're unpredictable, and both these problems are true. And when we turn this on, I wanted to share one of the quotes. We got a bunch of engineers, and engineers are not shy about sharing their opinions. So we got this fun quote, which I thought was good, is I find support bot, I'm going to hide the name of the actual bot we used. Usually confidently gives me answers and is just wrong 50% of the time, which means its answer is useless to me 100% of the time. And how many of you resonate with this? Yes. Right, and that's again a very nice way to say that if something is going to be right, even if forget 50%, if it's going to be right 80%, your trust is 0%. Right, because you don't know which 20% of it is wrong. Okay? So that's what we did, but we still haven't designed the right system yet. So let's rethink this. What would you do to protect for this? Wrong answers, hallucinations. Now we know that this simple model that we tried, which was this one, is not going to work. We can buy it easily and tell someone who's annoying us about have we done AI transformation that we have done AI transformation, but that's the only box it's going to check. It's not going to add enterprise value. So how will we change this?
Have some humans kind of verify stuff?
Humans verify. Yes? Other ideas?
Train it and provide more authenticated reviewed data?
Yes, train it and provide more of better data. Ask it to cite sources, yes. Would you expose it to the user directly? Would you send your intern to all your customers? No. Okay. Would you hide the intern? You might. You might hide the intern behind an expert to say, don't go tell them. You're brilliant. Come and talk to me. And let me tell you, let me see whether you can go and talk to them. Right? It's as simple as that, right? As you're going to say, I love your brilliance. I want you to take all questions. I want you to answer these questions really well. but please don't go and tell others that this is the answer yet. I want you to come back to me for me to check that this is right before you do it. Right? So all these are right answers, and the flavor of the version that we ended up was something like this. And let me just like walk through this because it's a little useful. The user sends a request to Slack, and we said, okay, we're not going to jump in with excitement to answer you right now. We're going to send it to Jira and store it. And then we're going to craft a prompt and send right context. I think you were sharing like, don't just ask it to respond. Craft a good prompt based on it. And that goes to the fancy AI tool, which generates an answer. The moment it generates an answer, we have two forks happening. One is the LLM as a judge, and the second LLM comes and says, is this answer, like, does it roughly sound right? Just score it as like high, medium, and low. And the second is a human who's a domain expert who also scores the answer and says, is this a good answer? Yes, no, or high, medium, low confidence, and generate it. And then you generate a final score. And then if it's high score, then you say, come back and write it to Jira, go to Slack and talk to the user. If it's a medium score, let's adjust the prompt and try again. Maybe there's something wrong we're doing in the context. Let's see if we can give better context. If it's a low score, give the feedback back to a domain expert who will work with an agentic flow expert to improve the system. Yeah? Now again, this is a simplified workflow. The actual workflow will be a little bit more messier. But this is a form of how you would actually deploy it in the wild so that you are leveraging it for the infinite capacity it has, but protecting it for the propensity to make errors.
What's an agentic flow expert?
Oh, I think of this as someone who can choose your technical system. Maybe it's N8N, which is a simpler version to do it. Maybe it's LangGraph. But someone who can then say, oh, this is not good because it's not reading data from that source. Let me add that also as an input. So they're able to reconfigure this workflow that is there. So think of it as a technical person who's adjusting the workflow on how you need to work. So you have a domain expert who's saying, hey, intern, your answer is not really good. And the domain expert is talking to someone to say, I think this answer is not really good because this intern is not talking to this particular base, and maybe we should change the knowledge sources, maybe we should change the prompt. And that person has got the ability to do it. Does it help? Okay. So what does this mean, right? It really means that realizing the promise of AI is not going to be about turning on a sparkle. Right? Every company which just says, hey, I now have a sparkle, I'm now an AI company. That's not the way you're going to be successful. But actually, it's going to require like rethinking workflows, configuring systems, and training people to play a different role. In other words, the change is going to happen in the underbelly of workflows and not in the simple sparkle that's there. So if someone is saying like, hey, have a sparkle, turn it on, you'll just be much more efficient. That's not the way it's going to work. For a long period of time, eventually we may get to that world, but for a long period of time, we got to think about how do I think of this capability that is there, which I cannot ignore, and how do I reimagine and rethink the workflows that are there? You all are with me? Okay. So now I wanted to briefly side track into the importance of evals. So when you deploy a human workforce at scale, you got to do it with, one of the things that you will do immediately is to think about what is the system I have for evaluating performance. Who's doing their job well? Who's not doing their job well? Are they meeting their expectations? You got to do it. The same thing when done for an agentic workforce is evals. Okay, so you have to know, like, and I was speaking to Tushar for a while back, and we were discussing this. Is when many software vendors talk to me and say, I got this AI thing, I usually tell them, share your eval scorecard with me. I will take the meeting with you if you have a very detailed eval scorecard that tells you how well your model is doing. And let's break this down a little bit. There are three pieces to it. The first is just a technical evaluation, which is what's the precision, what's the accuracy, what's the hallucination rate, what's the perplexity. It really is a question of have they fine-tuned the model for that use case. The second is the business outcomes, right? It's like, is it achieving the business outcome you want? And I'll give you a simple example. We had turned on just transcription service to summarize transcripts from interviews. Seems really simple, seems like an easy win AI use case. But what is the most important thing over there? The transcript summary has to be accurate. And if you do something as simple as like this summary, did this represent your conversation, and like have people score it, we were surprised by the low score that it got. Right? So, and like what we had to do is we had to change the prompt, we had to re-engineer the prompt, we had to give it a little bit more context, and this was the type of interview, and and then there were, you're not going to in an interview tell someone like that's a stupid answer, so you got to like figure out ways to incorporate like the user feedback into it. So it just becomes like a much more involved exercise, and then that's why there's this importance of evals, and that's what I mean by program evaluation is, did it meet the business outcomes? But it's not a one-time, do it, shut it, and forget it. There's an ongoing evaluation that needs to be part of your process because models change, data change, workflows change. Right? So you need to have an evaluation system in this new agentic world. So this is my summary of all my time leading IT in Facebook, Palantir, Google, and Roblox. Is there's only a single characteristic of an exceptional system. And an exceptional system is one where systems and humans learn and improve with usage. That's it. Right? If you're using a system where the system does not improve with usage or the human does not improve with usage, you're getting a fine system, but you're not going to get an exceptional system. Right? And if you think about what's happening with LLM inference, when LLM is actually answering something at inference, it's not learning anything. It's learned a bunch during training. It may have a little bit of RLHF happening, but during inference, it's not learning anything. The system is not improving with usage. And similarly, humans often are doing this cognitive offloading, where they take something that comes from an LLM, don't spend time thinking about it, and then use it elsewhere. And humans also are not getting better with usage. What's the point of this? Is for the long run, you got to be really careful of the learning loops that exist in the system. You got to make sure that these learning loops, either for the system and the humans, are nurtured. So let's take back to our workflow that was there, right? We had this workflow, and if you kind of zoom in, the importance of this step is the following. The agentic flow expert, and to answer your question a little bit more, is the person who's constantly fine-tuning the system and making the system better with usage. Saying, you're not answering this correctly, how can I help it? And then the domain expert is acting as a coach, and we all know that when we teach, we learn much better. Right? So that's how you are reinforcing the learning loops as opposed to getting humans out of the system. And I mentioned this briefly. There was a very good paper that came from Microsoft this year, which talked about cognitive offloading. And the idea of cognitive offloading is people who are very confident in the skills of AI don't apply critical thinking. And people who are very confident in their own skills, even if they use AI, they apply critical thinking. In other words, if you rely on the tool too much, then you're going to offload the cognitive work to the tool, and you're not going to actually get better in the task. Right? So you have to think about, as you're both for yourself, for the company, for the culture you're creating, what are you going to do to ensure that the cognitive offloading is like some way contained? And the workflow was one example of that, where the domain expert is not just blindly saying yes, they have to figure out a way to rate the answers that comes from the system, and in that they continue to apply their critical thinking that's there. So I think that when you think about the future, our roles are going to change. And the way it's going to change is that we all become coaches of some sort. And really the future is not going to be how we do things, it's going to be how we teach things. Right? You just imagine a world where this is maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, but you have infinite agents that are available at your disposal, and success is going to be, how do you deploy this? Right? So really, like in the future, success will be our ability to design these processes. It will be our ability to wield these agents and evaluate these agents. But I think most importantly, it will also be our ability to retain our critical thinking when we do this. Okay? I said a whole bunch. Let's try to capture these, right? What are the different things we talked about? Lead the change. It starts with you. Second is you got to foster a culture of learning. Third is pick the right areas of impact. Those were the sections where we said most people are having success over here. We talked about characteristics where you can be successful. Fourth is either you develop a technical architecture or you have someone in your organization responsible for building the technical architecture. Fifth is, remember, it's the underbelly of workflows where magic happens. So work is not going away, workflows are going away, so you get really good at redesigning workflows. Then reinforce learning loops. So don't fall into this trap of cognitive offloading either for you or for the organization. And then just be prepared to change everyone's job. I think all of our jobs are going to change. I see this as, I've been through multiple waves of technology, right from Y2K to the web to mobile to I'm going to skip crypto. I don't think that's a real trend. To cloud and to AI. I think this is probably like the biggest wave that's hitting us. And you can frame this as a threat. You can frame this as an opportunity. I really think it's an opportunity because we are entering an era where we are going to have all of these come and help us accelerate productivity. But there is not going to be an easy path to turning it on and getting magic. There is going to be a hard but fun path. And the hard and fun path is the work that's ahead of all of us. If we embrace this hard and fun path, then we're all going to be avant-garde when it comes to leading this change. I think that's it. Thank you.